Is it love? Is it love? Oh, I love her so. I just have to go. Oh, I love her so. And I'm sorry.
Hello there! In this video, we're going to be learning about the infrared sensor, the color sensor, and very briefly, the medium motor. Now, let's get straight into the infrared sensor. The first thing we're going to learn is how to trigger a command based on proximity. But before we do that, we need to talk about the infrared sensor. This is the infrared remote. It works in tandem with the infrared sensor to form a connection. The infrared remote consists of 5 different buttons and a switch to change the channels. The buttons map to perform individual functions if you so desire to. The infrared remote has a sensor that allows it to connect with the infrared sensor so that you can measure proximity and make commands based off of that. Now we know that the infrared remote and the infrared sensor work together. We're going to learn how to design a program based off that connection. So, what we need to do is we need to select a loop block, and what we're trying to do is make the robot move backwards once the infrared sensor comes in close proximity with the infrared remote. So, we're going to put a move steering inside of this loop, and we're going to set it to on. We're going to change the power to around 50. Now, on our loop icon, we're going to set the parameters to infrared sensor and beacon proximity. We're going to change the value over here. These are the different proximity settings, so when it's equal to, when it's not equal to, when it's greater than or equal to, when it's less than or equal to. We're going to select the 5th and final option when it's less than or equal to. Now we have the distance at which the command triggers. So in this case it's 50 centimeters. I want to change that to 10 centimeters. So if the infrared sensor comes within 10 centimeters of the infrared remote, the movement will trigger. Now the movement in question will just cause the robot to move backwards. So all we're going to do is we're going to place a move steering block and change the power to -50. So if we play the function, the robot will move indefinitely until it comes within range of the infrared beacon. The loop will then end and the robot will move backwards. Now, let's test this out. The next thing we want to do is to make a command start after pressing a certain button on the infrared remote. So what we need to do is again place a loop block and of course the play. Now the loop parameters this time will be infrared sensor and then remote. We're going to select the channel and we're going to select which button on the remote. So I've gone for the button ID number 1, which is in the top left-hand corner of the remote. So now the loop will end once the button is pressed. We're going to keep this loop blank because we want nothing to happen until the button is pressed. Afterwards, we're going to have a simple move steering. We're going to set the power to 50. And so what will happen is after a certain button on the infrared remote is pressed, the loop over here will end and then the movement function can take place. So when I press the button, the loop will stop and my robot will move forward. Now, let's test this out.
I just have to go. Oh, I love her so. And I'm sorry, girl.
What we're going to do now is the exact opposite of what we just did. We're going to make a command or movement stop after the press of a button on the infrared remote. The first thing we need to do is place a loop, and we're going to set the parameters to the exact same as last time. So that means going to infrared sensor and infrared remote. I'm going to map the button to the same channel and the same button on the remote. Essentially what happens is when I press the button, whatever's happening inside of the loop will stop. So to keep things simple, we're going to place a move steering, and we're going to keep it on indefinitely. So until the button is pressed, the robot will continue to move forward. Now let's test it out. Here we have the color sensor. It is connected to the programmable brick and can detect both color and light. Now, we are going to be looking at some simple commands such as displaying color on the programmable brick. Now, we are going to make the robot display what color it is detecting. To make your robot detect color is quite a simple task. The first thing you need to do is to select a color sensor block and place it here. We're going to set the color sensor to measure color, and afterwards we're going to place a display block right next to it. We're going to change the display block to display text in the form of a grid. Then we are going to change its input to wired. This essentially means that the programmable brick already has some preset inputs and preset texts. However, we are going to make it receive data from the color sensor. This is done in the form of a data wire, and essentially the color sensor will spit out the data and the display will read it and display it on the screen of the programmable brick. For example, if I flash a red color in front of the color sensor will spit out data such as the numerical value that has been assigned to red. Therefore, in this case, number 5. The data will then be transferred to the programmable brick, and on the screen we should see the number 5. Now, let's test it out. As we know, the color sensor assigns a different numerical value to each color. Knowing this, we're going to test the color sensor, and it will determine which value is which color as we show the color sensor these blocks. First of all, we're going to start with this green block, and we're going to place that in front of the color sensor. As you can see, it's giving us a reading of 3. When we look at the scale, 3 is the color of green. Next off, we're going to use the blue block, and that's going to give us a reading of 2. Next, we're going to use the red block, and that's going to give us a reading of 5. 5 is the numerical value assigned to the color red. This shows that the color sensor can, and in fact does, detect color and assigns it a numerical value. Now we'll use the white one. As you can see, the white one has a numerical value of 6. Now we are going to learn how to switch between two functions using the switch tool. The switch tool is located in the flow control icon, and all we have to do is select it and drag it over here. Now we're going to change the parameters of the switch tool, and doing this by clicking on color sensor, measuring, and then color. As you can see, we have two colors here, black and no color. These are the values that you have set that your color sensor will react to. Now I'm going to set it to red. So if I display a red color in front of the color sensor, only then the color sensor will react to it. For that, I'm going to make the robot move forward. So, if I place a red block in front of the color sensor should detect that the color is red and therefore make the robot move forward. Now, if I were to make the other side of the switch blue and make the movement for that reverse, when I would show the color sensor a blue block, the movement would be reverse. This is the use of the switch tool. So, to recap, if I put a red block in front of my color sensor, it will move to this function. If I put a blue block in front of it, it will go to this function. And that's the essential basics of the switch block. It is always important to keep the switch block inside one loop, as that allows for the switch block to constantly be running, and therefore the color sensor will always check its environment and react according to that. Now, let's test it out.
Is it love? Is it love?
Now we're going to make a color start a movement function or command. First, we need a loop, and this will be a blank loop as we want nothing to happen until a color is shown. So, we're going to change the parameters of the loop to color sensor and color, and we're going to choose which color we want to essentially activate the function. Now, we're going to work with red. So after this, we insert a move steering. And now once the color red is shown, the movement will take place. And this is quite simple. You can map this to any other function that you've created, and it will work in the same way. Now, let's test it out.
Oh, I love her so. I just have to go.